Hi everyone, it's Lana from Lana Under Pressure, and there are a lot of Instapot beginner guides and tutorials out there, so I thought in this video I would go over the top 10 problems and solutions that most cooks have when starting out with their Instapot. Problem number one that a lot of people ask is, how do I put on this darn lid, right? It looks completely super complicated, but it really isn't. If you notice, on the back side here there's a little arrow, and there's an arrow right here on the side of the pot. So you just line those two up, twist, and that's to close. Easy as that. And when you hear that little sound, that means it's closed and you're ready to cook. So then when all the pressure's released and you're ready to open, you just do the same thing. You twist it and lift it right up, just like that. Now another little neat trick is these little brackets here on the side. You can see them, there's two. You can actually put them right inside the space on the handles of the side to hold it open while you're cooking or while you're sauteing or just while you're serving. The second problem that a lot of users run into is trying to figure out what all of these preset buttons mean and when you're supposed to use them. And the solution and secret to that is don't even worry about them. Instapot makes it easy for you. They have presets like poultry, soup, stew, meat, and those really are just buttons that will set a specific pressure and time for what they feel is the average for making those different things. But in most recipes, the Instapot doesn't take into account whether your chicken is frozen or not, how much liquid you have in there. So the pressure, even though the pressure will probably stay the same, I usually cook most things on high pressure, but the time is going to be different. And so what I do is I only cook on using manual and pressure. I set my own pressure, I set my own time, and you use the, if your Instapot has an adjust button, you can adjust the pressure high or low. You can adjust the saute function, high, normal, or low. I also use the cancel button to stop the pressure button, the saute button, and the timer button. The only other preset that I use is the yogurt button, and that's because that doesn't do pressure. What that does is keep the Instapot at a particular temperature over a long period of time in order to go ahead and make yogurt. But other than that, you don't have to worry about the other presets. Just go ahead and use manual according to your recipe, and it makes it easy. A note on that also is some Instant Pots have an adjust button, and that is what you would press to adjust, say, your pressure from high and low, or adjust the saute high and low. If your Instant Pot doesn't have an adjust button, then what you would do is you would just keep pressing, say, the saute button to toggle through high saute, high temperature, normal temperature, and low temperature. The third question that a lot of users wonder is, what does quick release and natural pressure release mean? So when the Instapot is done cooking and pressurizing, it will count down as it's going, and then when it reaches 0, it'll turn to warm mode and it'll stop creating pressure in there. And at that point, it's going to naturally pressure release, which you'll see NPR or NR, and that's natural pressure release. And what that means is that the pressure is just going to slowly over time release itself a little bit at a time. And depending on what you have cooking, that can take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. So if you have like a large pot of soup in there with a lot of liquid, that could take up to 30 minutes to natural release. And in that case, if you see a recipe that says natural release or natural pressure release, you're just going to do nothing. You're going to leave it alone until the little silver pin goes down. Then you know that it's done releasing all the pressure and you can just open it up. Now, quick release or QR, what that means is that you are going to manually release the pressure once it's done cooking. And the way you do that is you're going to move this from vent. You're just going to push it down, and you're going to see all the steam come out of the top. And once it's done, and that usually takes, 1 minute to 2 minutes, depending how much pressure is built up in there, then you're done and you can go ahead and open up the pot. So the fourth question a lot of people have is, when do you quick release and when do you natural pressure release? Now, when you're using a recipe, if it's a good recipe, they'll tell you and they'll let you know. But when you're trying to create your own recipes or cook on the fly, a good rule of thumb is if you're cooking meat, any kind of meat, especially lean meats like chicken breast and things like that, you want a natural pressure release. So the way I like to explain it is, think of your meat as a sponge, and you're spending all of that time in your Instant Pot putting in moisture as you're cooking with that pressure, pushing that moisture into that meat. Now when you quick release and you let all of the pressure out, in essence what you're doing is not only letting the steam out of the pot, but you're also taking all of that pressure out of that meat, just like wringing a sponge, and you're making it dry again. So what was the point of doing all of that work? So when it comes to meats, you're going to allow them usually to natural pressure release. The only time that might be a little different is with something like ground meat that doesn't get dry, or chicken thighs which don't get dry, or if you're cooking something like chicken thighs inside of a liquid, then sometimes you can go ahead and quick release. But I like to use the rule of thumb that if you're cooking meat, always natural pressure release. Also, when you're cooking things like pasta or beans, things that they can tend to foam up when you quick release. So in that instance, you want to do what is called a controlled release. And the way you do that is, all that means is you're going to release the pressure and stop. Release the pressure and stop. And that way, you're quick releasing, but you're doing it in a way so that all of the foam or the liquid doesn't spurt out and make a complete mess, which has happened to me a few times until I figured that one out. Now I know the first time that I started using the Instapot, I was really nervous about turning that valve release and letting the steam out. It can be a little intimidating. But one of the ladles that they'll give you with the Instapot, this is like a rice paddle or a ladle, also has a little hole at the end. And a cute trick is that you can use this to attach to the venting and pull it towards you so that you don't have to use your finger and release the steam. Now the fifth problem a lot of people run into is the dreaded burn notice. And that's when your display in the middle of cooking says burn, and you wonder, what am I supposed to do? Now that can happen for three reasons really. The first is you didn't put enough liquid in the Instant Pot. And now when you're cooking, a good rule of thumb is to always have at least a cup of liquid in a 6-quart Instant Pot. The second reason that could happen is you're cooking, so you started off with at least a cup of liquid, but you're cooking something that absorbs liquid, like pasta or beans. And in that case, you need to offset that and know that because that liquid is going to get absorbed, you need to add a little bit more before you start. The third reason, and this is what usually is the cause of it, is when you're sauteing something to begin with, and then you add your liquid and you go ahead and put your lid on and you start the pressure, forgetting that there are brown bits of food on the bottom of the liner, and that will cause you to get a burn notice. So the way that you fix that is anytime that you're sauteing anything, you want to go ahead, before you add your liquid, you want to make sure that you use something like a wooden spatula to really scrape up the brown bits. And so, for instance, I saute a lot of onions and peppers before I start cooking, and sometimes I'll saute and brown the meat or brown the chicken. And that will cause it to stick to the bottom, and that's perfectly fine because that's great flavor. But what I do before I have it come to pressure is I add a little bit of liquid, and then I use my wooden spatula and I just scrape the liner, scrape it, scrape it, scrape it, and then that gets all of the brown bits off, and then I can add the rest of my stuff and go ahead and add the lid and start pressure cooking. And that way I won't get the burn notice. Now number 6 is, what happens if you do get that burn notice in the middle of cooking? And that's happened to me quite a bit, and it's okay. That doesn't mean you've ruined your food. What you're going to do is if it happens in the middle of the cooking, all you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and press cancel. Then you're going to quick release. You're going to open the pot. And most of the time, if it's because you sauteed, you'll go ahead and scrape the bottom up even better and make sure there's no brown bits. Or if it needs a little extra liquid, you would add a little extra liquid. Then you'd go ahead and start it up again, put it to sealed position, and then go ahead and set it for pressure again to cook for the rest of the time that it did. And it's okay. Most of the time you can go ahead and save it that way, and it's no problem. Number 7 is what happens when you have steam coming from the pot. Now, there's a little pin here, and while the Instapot is coming to pressure, you're going to see, and it's very natural to have a little bit of steam coming out from around the pin, because that means it's going ahead and equalizing the pressure. However, if you see a lot of steam coming from, especially around the lid, and that happens, and it's happened to me, all that means is that probably what happened is that your sealing ring on the inside wasn't put on correctly. And I'll go ahead and show you that. So if that was to happen, you would just open it, and here is the sealing ring, right here. And now this sealing ring is what creates the seal for pressure cooking. And this comes out very easily, just like that. And usually when you get steam coming out from the lid on all sides, it's because either you forgot to put the sealing ring, which I have done because I've, cleaned it and then forgot to put it back in, or it just isn't put in correctly. So I'm going to show you how to go ahead and put that sealing ring in. And all you have to do is you're just going to lay it just like that around the edge. Push it in on one side underneath this little metal ridge. And what I do is I just take my finger or my thumb and I just slide it around, pushing down, and it will have the ring. The sealing ring will go right into place. And when you get this, this part that's sticking out, just go ahead and use both fingers, push it underneath, and there you go. The sealing ring is right in there. And so that's what you're going to check if you see a lot of steam coming out from around the ring. Question number 8 is, how do you get that smell out of the inner ring? Now, when pressure cooking certain foods that have a strong smell, like garlic, a lot of tomato-based things or herbs, it's almost like the Instant Pot is pressurizing that smell right into the silicone ring. And you can take this out and wash it with soap and water. And a lot of people have tried different tricks to get rid of that smell, like freezing it or putting it outside, things like that. What I found helps is, one, cleaning it right away, but then storing the Instant Pot with the lid upside down, just like this. And that allows the airflow to go through, and I haven't noticed a smell really with my cooking rings at all just by doing that. Now, another trick though is, if you know that you're going to be cooking things like cheesecakes that are really delicate, sometimes those can almost absorb the smell of the ring. So what I do is I've gone on Amazon and I have bought different color rings. So for instance, this green ring is what I use when I'm cooking things that are delicate, like my cheesecake or my flan de queso or my bread pudding, and I'll put all those recipes in the description below. I use the green ring. When I'm cooking typical type things that don't have too strong a smell, dinners and things like that, I use my clear ring. And then in a Ziploc bag, I have a black ring that I use, and I use this for things that like really strong smells, like if I'm cooking my chicken with a lot of garlic and things like that. And then I'll use just this ring and I'll air it out, and then I'll keep it in a Ziploc bag. And by doing that, then I don't transfer the smells, and it's worked really great. And I'll make sure that I put also a link in where you can buy these off of Amazon in the description below. But having different rings for different things works out really well. So problem number 9 hopefully won't happen to you, but if it does, don't worry about it. And that's what happens if you pour liquid into the Instant Pot, but without the liner. So this is the liner bowl for the Instant Pot, and this is what you will cook in. But sometimes, if it isn't in there, or you're cleaning it, or something happens, it has been known to happen that people have poured water straight into the housing. And what you're going to do is, first, don't panic. You probably haven't ruined it or broken it. What you're going to do is unplug it right away. That's the first thing you're going to do. Second, you're going to take a towel and you're going to wipe up any moisture or water that's left in there. And then the third thing you're going to do is allow it to air dry for a couple of days. And once it air dries, if it hasn't shorted out, it should work just fine, and you've probably saved it. Now, something that I've done, because a certain someone accidentally poured water on their laptop computer, what I did in order to save that, and it worked, and you can do it with the Instant Pot as well, is I stacked up some books, and then I placed a baking rack over those with a fan blowing underneath. And you can do that and place the Instant Pot right on top of that baking rack so that the fan can blow up underneath the housing, and that will air it out even more and hopefully save your Instant Pot. So last but not least is number 10, and this one is not so much a problem as it is a warning. And that is, never ever cook with your Instant Pot on the stove. So a lot of people, and I've seen it, have put their Instant Pot to cook on their stove because they feel like they can put it under the stove or oven exhaust and and that will help with the steam release. The problem with that is I can't tell you how many times someone has done that and then has said that they've accidentally bumped into their knobs on their stove and caused a fire and melted or broke their Instant Pot, and there's no coming back from that one. So just so you know that what comes out of the Instant Pot generally is just steam. So as long as you don't have it directly underneath your cabinets, you should be fine, and there's no reason to have it out in underneath an exhaust. So you always want to cook with your Instant Pot on a counter and never on the stove. So there you have it. Those are the top 10 solutions to the top 10 problems that most people have when cooking with their Instant Pot. And if you like this video, I just ask that you go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel just by clicking on the little bell. And I'll also put all of the links to different products and some of the recipes that I talk about in the description. Bye!